Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why sometimes you can focus really well, and other times you just can't seem to stick to anything? Well, this new study might have a clue. It turns out that trying to be really flexible with your tasks can actually make it harder to stay focused and stable, and this might be influenced by rewards. This is a super interesting paper that dives into how our brains balance two important things: being flexible, meaning we can easily switch between tasks or ideas, and being stable, meaning we can stick to one task and ignore distractions. Think of it like this. Sometimes you need to be a quick change artist, hopping from one thing to another, and other times you need to be a rock, unmoving and focused. This study explores if these two abilities are like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other must go down. The researchers noticed that while many theories suggest this flexibility-stability trade-off exists, the evidence is a bit mixed. They had a hunch that maybe it is the way we ramp up our effort, especially when rewards are involved, that causes this trade-off. They tested this idea with two experiments. Participants played a special kind of game where they had to switch between tasks. Sometimes they were offered bigger rewards, and sometimes the reward situation stayed the same for a short or long time. What they found was pretty cool. Bigger rewards actually made people better at switching tasks, which is flexibility, but at the same time it made them worse at ignoring distractions, which is stability. So that suggests a trade-off is definitely happening. And it seems to be driven by how much we're motivated by rewards. Okay, so what is the big picture here? Basically, our brains have to manage how much we focus and how easily we can switch gears. This is called cognitive control. Sometimes we need to be really good at ignoring distractions and staying on task. That is stability. Other times we need to be able to switch tasks quickly and adapt. That is flexibility. People used to think these went hand in hand, or that you could improve both at the same time. But this new research and some other recent work is suggesting that there is actually a trade-off, especially when rewards are on the table. The researchers propose that this trade-off happens because our brains are smart about how much effort they put in. Cognitive control, the kind of mental effort needed for these tasks, can be tiring. So if there is a big reward involved, we might push ourselves harder. But instead of putting that extra effort into being both flexible and stable, our brain might choose to prioritize one over the other. This is because trying to do both at full tilt might just be too much. In experiment 1, they had 80 students play a task-switching game. It sounds a little complicated, but the core idea is that they had to do two different types of tasks very quickly. Sometimes they had to switch between these tasks, and sometimes they repeated the same task. They also had trials where some information was distracting and others where it wasn't. They ended up with 62 students who met their accuracy requirements. Now, here is where it gets interesting. They manipulated how much reward students could earn. They had low reward blocks where students could earn just 1 cent per correct and fast response, and high reward blocks where they could earn 10 cents. They also played with how long these reward blocks lasted, from short blocks of just 4 or 6 trials to longer blocks of 10 or 12 trials. This timescale or duration of the reward was a key part of their experiment. They wanted to see if the length of time you are aiming for a reward changes how your brain works. So imagine you are playing this game. Before each block of trials, they'd show you a cue telling you how much you could earn per trial, and for how many trials that reward rate would last. Then for each individual trial, you'd get a little reminder of the reward for that specific trial. This setup allowed them to measure two things: flexibility by looking at how much slower people were when they had to switch tasks compared to repeating a task. That is the switch cost. And stability by looking at how much slower people were when they were distracted by irrelevant information. That is the incongruence cost, or interference. After a practice phase, the participants went through the reward phase with all these different reward conditions and block lengths. They had to be fast and accurate to get the reward, and they had to beat a certain speed based on their practice performance. All of this data was then analyzed using fancy statistics. But the main idea was to see how the higher rewards and different block lengths affected those switch costs and incongruence costs. Let's get to the exciting part: the results. First off, as expected, people were slower and made more mistakes when they had to switch tasks or when there was distracting information. That is normal. But the real findings came when they looked at the effects of the rewards. They found that when the rewards were higher, 10 cents versus 1 cent, people got better at switching tasks. Their switch costs went down. This means higher rewards made them more flexible. This supports previous research showing that rewards can boost our ability to reconfigure our mental tasks. However, and this is the crucial part, This increased flexibility came at a cost to stability. In those high reward blocks, especially shorter ones, people actually had higher incongruence costs. This means they were more easily distracted by irrelevant information. So bigger rewards made them more flexible but less stable. It is a clear trade-off. This trade-off was particularly noticeable in the shorter reward blocks. When the reward was only available for a short burst of trials, the effect of rewards on flexibility and stability was more pronounced. This suggests that the timescale of reward matters. They also looked at what happened within each participant, block by block. They found that in blocks where people showed less stability, higher incongruence costs, they were also showing more flexibility, lower switch costs, especially in high-reward short blocks. This means that even within the same person, at different points in time during the experiment, flexibility and stability were trading off with each other, driven by the reward conditions. Then they checked for individual differences. They looked to see if people who were generally more stable, had higher overall incongruence costs, tended to be less flexible. And guess what? They found that participants who were generally less stable also tended to show greater flexibility in high-reward situations, especially in short blocks. This suggests that there might be stable personality, like differences that influence this trade-off dynamic. So experiment 1 showed a clear trade-off, especially at short timescales. Higher rewards boosted flexibility but hurt stability. Experiment 2 was designed to build on experiment 1. They wanted to see if these results would hold up with a few tweaks. They used only the shortest and longest block lengths, 4 and 12 trials, to make the timescale difference even more obvious. They also randomized the order of rewards instead of alternating them, which might have made the reward structure less predictable. The idea was that a more unpredictable reward schedule might either make the trade-off clearer or reveal something new about how we manage effort. They recruited 87 participants this time, and after exclusions, they had 61. The procedure was very similar, but they tweaked the speed needed for a reward to be slightly faster than in experiment 1. A really interesting addition in experiment 2 was that after all the tasks, they asked participants to rate how motivated they felt for each reward and block length combination. This gives us a direct measure of how they perceived the incentives. The analysis was mostly the same, but they added in the analysis of these motivation ratings. And the results in experiment 2 largely mirrored experiment 1. High rewards again led to reduced switch costs, more flexibility, especially in short blocks. And again, high rewards led to increased incongruence costs, less stability, also more noticeable in short blocks. So the trade-off held up. Interestingly, in experiment 2, the randomized reward order didn't lead to the same clear block-by-block or individual differences trade-off seen in experiment 1. The researchers suggest that the predictable alternating reward schedule in experiment 1 might have made it easier for participants to adopt and maintain a specific control strategy, strengthening those within subject and individual difference findings. When rewards are unpredictable, it might be harder to commit to favoring one mode over the other. Now, for the discussion, what does all this mean for us? The main takeaway is that the idea of a flexibility-stability trade-off seems to be real, and it is definitely influenced by rewards and the timescale of those rewards. When the stakes are high, meaning bigger potential rewards, we can become more flexible, better at switching tasks. But this comes at the price of stability, meaning we become more prone to distractions. This effect is strongest when the rewards are signaled for a shorter duration. The researchers suggest a couple of reasons why this might happen. One idea is that stability, which involves keeping focused and blocking out distractions over time, might actually be more mentally demanding than flexibility, which involves quick adjustments. So, when we're motivated by rewards, we might allocate our limited mental effort towards the task that feels less costly or yields quicker benefits, which could be flexibility. It is like choosing to sprint for a short, high-reward burst rather than sustaining a long, steady effort. Another key aspect is the time scale. The fact that this trade-off was most evident in short blocks fits with other research showing that how we allocate effort depends on how long we expect to be rewarded. Shorter windows of opportunity might push us towards more intense, perhaps more flexible, short bursts of control. What makes this study stand out is that they measured both flexibility and stability at the same time, in the same task, and varied the rewards globally. This is a more robust way to test the trade-off than looking at these abilities in separate experiments. Their multi-level analysis, looking at both within-person dynamics and individual differences, also adds another layer to our understanding. The fact that the within-person and individual difference findings didn't fully replicate in experiment 2 is also noteworthy. It highlights how factors like reward predictability can influence the expression of these cognitive control strategies. A predictable reward schedule might train us to adopt specific long-term strategies, whereas a random one might keep us more generally alert but less specialized. So what does this mean for you and me in our daily lives? Well, if you have a big project with a deadline that feels far away, you might naturally lean towards stability-focusing planning and minimizing distractions. But if there is a more immediate reward for a specific task, like finishing a small part of that project quickly, you might find yourself more flexible, easily switching between tasks, but perhaps more susceptible to distractions along the way. This research suggests that understanding these reward dynamics and timescales can help us predict and potentially manage how our own cognitive control shifts. It is a reminder that our brain's effort allocation is sophisticated, and rewards can powerfully shape whether we prioritize focus or flexibility. Future research could explore how different types of rewards or even punishments might influence this trade-off, and how we can leverage this knowledge to optimize our own learning and performance. This was a fascinating look into how motivation and reward can alter our basic cognitive abilities. If you found this interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more breakdowns of exciting science. Let me know in the comments what you think about this flexibility trade-off and how you see it playing out in your own life. See you next time.